Jack rounded the corner and immediately held his arms up and shielded his face from the burning flames. Claire stopped behind him and held her weapon ready, only to be greeted by the dancing flames. Her eyes fell upon the charred remains of the pilot and the other rescue worker inside the cockpit, hands gripping the rope ladder, which was now useless. Jack turned in to walk away and turned to see Claire still watching the flames. He understood her despair, but staying here was no longer safe. Jack reached over and brushed her hand as if to take his. She pulled it away and nodded instead. Come on, it's not safe here. The pair left down the hallway and passed through the door to the fire escape, and instead of heading for the other door around the corner. It looked to be a dated waiting room. A lone typewriter sat on the desk with half-typed page sticking out of the top. Claire took a seat as Jack scanned the room carefully. There wasn't a whole lot to see. There was a strange storage container near the opposite door and plenty of seating. Whoever manned their post was long gone, and though some personal belongings remained, Jack spotted it on the opposite wall. Do you think we could still get past that helicopter if the fire was gone? Maybe there's a way out of the back of the station. Claire nodded. It's worth a shot. Hell, even a car at this point would be amazing. She undid her ponytail and brushed her long brown hair back to the scrunchie. Jack then looked away, trying not to stare awkwardly. Yeah, so I think we should still try to make it past, because if we could use the fire extinguisher here, if it works, great. If it doesn't, then we can always turn around. Sounds like a plan. Was avoiding eye contact part of your plan too? She called him on his wandering eyes. No, I will just get the fire extinguisher. He then rushed to the far end and retrieved it, and not very secure, and then headed for the door. Claire reluctantly jogged after him, holstering her weapon as she went. They walked down the winding hallway, and Jack pulled the pin and drew it to the side it went. Know how to use that thing? Point and squeeze, he answered sarcastically, as he held a canister in front of him and pulled the trigger. A spray of white and gray foam, the flames died down, and eventually went extinct. The heat of the melted body of the helicopter was still upon them. Claire took the first few steps. Jack followed suit as he unholstered his weapon. They moved down the hall and stopped dead in their tracks. Before them was a motionless corpse. That wasn't what made them stop. Upon the corpse and all around them, perched on the furniture and light fixtures, were the large black crows. Jack raised an eyebrow. You think they're infected? Claire peered up at one with deep black eyes and sharpened beak, watching her stand still. They seem, Claire thought for a second, chill? That was one of them that let out a sharp cry. The obnoxious noise made Jack shiver. Your move, Claire. I did the whole fire thing, you know. She shot him a glare and refocused her eyes on the beady eyes watching them. There had to be at least a couple dozen. Run! Claire shouted as she sprinted forward, leaping over the pecked corpse down the hall. Jack stumbled to follow, tripping over the corpse as he went. The crow's wings cluttered around the giant fans behind them. Jack watched in front of them as Claire threw open the metal door to the roof and toppled over behind her. Claire jumped and threw her shoulder into the metal door until it clicked into place. Several low thumps were heard as tiny heads cracked into the reinforced frame. Claire laughed a little while listening to them smack and drop. Jack looked up from his lying position on the concrete. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Very funny, he said, taking in deep breaths as he spoke. Not the star of your high school track team, huh? Claire said as she walked past him, still lying on the ground. He gathered himself up off the ground and grinned sheepishly. Not the star of much, honestly. He then followed Claire to the edge of the heliport to a nearby rail where they could make out the skyline in the distance. Dropped out of law school, drank a little, and partied a little too much, and now my family has disowned me. Claire seemed to understand in such a weird way. You know, at least you have a family to worry about. He leaned his head against the railing and just shambling monsters in the streets below. They were watching. I've been looking for my brother Chris since getting here. I know it seems strange to walk right into this mess, but he's all I have left. My parents died when I was 12. Chris took me in. It seemed near impossible for him to take care of a child while going through the police academy, but he did it. I put him through hell and I owe him a lot. I went to college a couple years back, and all this started to happen in the news. He started answering calls and emails. So you hope your ride to come down here, all for your brother? Yeah, weird, right? You would say I'm completely irresponsible, Claire said as she pulled some keys from her pocket. He couldn't stand my stubbornness. He always told me riding was dangerous, and he was right. She tossed her keys over the railing to the pavement below. You like motorcycles too? Jack asked. I've been riding for years, since Chris first got one. I had stolen it countless times. I love it. Feeling the wind in your hair, the freedom. It's the only place in the world where you can be yourself. Jack finished her sentence. His eyes glanced at her quickly and back to the concrete enclosure below. Right, she answered nervously. She had no idea what he was into bikes too. Jack walked over at her. Claire, we will find your brother, I promise. I hope so. So don't give up on your family, Jack. Something tells me they haven't given up on you yet. Jack then turned to the build railing. Yeah, well, you don't know my father. Hey, but she was interrupted by something heavy. Shh, Jack answered as he stepped in front of her. The stairs. Claire unholstered her weapon and stood ready. Jack raised his weapon at the stairs, was to decelerate whatever was coming. It finally came into a view. A giant-looking man, looking humanoid with pale skin and a long black trench coat. He had a fedora on his head and dropped what looked like a serpent rocket launcher onto the pavement, the heavy weight of the weapon making Jack's shaken resonance. It turned its head towards him, the pair looking at a couple action figures compared to the hulking monstrosity. Jack reacted first, firing the first 3 rounds of the beast. Claire opened up the second, squeezing 2 rounds out of the chamber. The giant man lunged for them, taking 3 steps in large round bound towards them. The man caught Jack by the neck and swung him like a rag doll. Claire turned and fired 2 more rounds as she raced with his wriggling body onto the stairs. He had smacked the stair railing and was now struggling to get up. The large man turned and started for them once again, in a brisk walk. Jack, get up! Come on! She pulled him down to the stairs as a giant bus burst through the stair railing. Jack stumbled to his feet as they reached the bottom steps. The man was lying face down on the concrete nearby. Is he dead? Claire said, knowing that there was no way to be that easy. I don't know. Let's just get moving. He leaned on Claire, so they staggered out and around the trench men. There's a door that has an access tunnel we could take, Claire said, pointing to a sign. Just then Jack let out a yelp. Claire looked down to see the man had reached out, grasping his leg, and it was pulling him down and threw him in one direction across the concrete. Claire snapped into the action and pulled the trigger on her handgun, forcing a round into the man's head, making him stumble backward. That worked a little, Claire thought to herself, as it swung its fist at her, knocking her to the ground. Her stomach writhing in pain. Jack struggled to move, his entire body covered in abrasions and bruises. His eyes caught a glint of something shiny. Claire, keys! He swiped them and stuffed them into his pocket as he rose to his feet. He pulled out his handgun from his leather chest holster, fired 3 rounds. In his adrenaline, high, the third struck him in the back of the head. It fell in front of Claire. Jack pushed himself up off the floor when he noticed Claire on her side. Claire! He yelled to her as she rolled onto her back, gasping for air. You okay? Yeah, she whispered. I just got the wind knocked out of me. She rose to her feet, grabbing her side. Jack swallowed his own pain as they leaned to each other to the access entrance. Jack looked back as he opened the hatch door, and Claire stepped in first. The mysterious silent man was gone. The monster was a man with no name, no title. He was Mr. X. Jack laughed a little, before shutting and locking the heavy hatch behind him. "What the hell was that thing?" Claire cried, as the pair hurried down the tunnel, leaving a giant monstrosity behind them. Mr. X would soon not be forgotten by either of them. "Looks like we're a pretty good team." "I wouldn't have exactly said we won that fight or anything," Claire groaned at him. The tunnel opened finally. They must have escaped into some sort of underground route. They separated from each other finally, and Claire leaned against a set of lockers, Jack throwing his weight onto the opposite wall. She sat across from him, watching as he checked his handgun. "I got 6 more shots in his magazine, and my 2 spare clips are full," Jack said. Claire shrugged as she dropped her magazine from the Browning and pulled to the side back once. A 9mm round sprang out and clattered to the concrete. "4 rounds left in my magazine, 1 extra clip ready to go. I also have a Beretta, but that's for backup. 15 bullets in that one." "Have you always carried so many guns while riding?" "Traveling hundreds of miles alone, sometimes at night, right?" "You bet I do. I bought this Beretta from my brother. It's actually a service weapon. He mentioned getting me a custom Beretta from his friend in the force and left this one with me until I got my own." "Well, at least we have weapons," Jack sighed. "Not like it matters, Jack. You saw that thing out there. Multiple shots between us and it barely flinched. That's not just another zombie." Claire reloaded her Browning and holstered it. Jack nodded. "I know we're itching to get to the station, but maybe we should look around for some weapons." "I agree. Any idea where to start?" "I know most of the Armordis underground police stations, depending on what's out there, may not make on what we have," Jack said. Claire seemed to have think for a moment. "Back in high school, my brother showed me around the station. If we go for the reception, we should be able to find the STARS office. They had a gun nut and biochemist stand on hand. I wouldn't be shocked if we found a bunch of gear in there." Jack smiled. "We may just make it out of here after all." Jack rose from his seat onto the floor and approached the ladder which led them back to the station. "We better move while we can. Who knows when we'll see that thing again." Claire had wished that she hadn't mentioned that beast from earlier. Her stomach dropped at the thought of running into it again. What happened if they found him before they got to the STARS office? What if there were no more weapons in the office? Even with some gear, that didn't guarantee their survival. Claire remembered the radio Leon had gave her on the streets. If they could make it to the office, she should call Leon and make a plan from there. If Leon was still alive, they could regroup for escape. If not, Jack and her can make a run for it to the basement, since the streets and roof were no longer an option. "I'll go first. If it's not clear, we'll evaluate." Claire hoped it was clear. The last thing she wanted to do was to turn around and backtrack through Mr. X, a helicopter wreckage, and undead crows.